somebody or something. Anyway, today we have our last planning committee of the year. How are we doing, Miss Duffany?
You have a quorum. I can do a roll call if you like.
I would like you to do that.
Okay. Councillor Judas. Thank you. Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Good morning.
Councillor Brockington.
Good morning.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Hughley.
Here.
Vice Chair Gower.
Here.
Chair Harder.
Here.
And is Councillor Elshinturi with us today?
No, he's in a meeting with Toronto, and so he told me that he would not be able to come in. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 2, 3, and 4 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on December 9th, please. That's not right. Prior to their consideration.
January 27th.
January 27th. In the midst of all of our growth projection 3-day marathon, please email the committee or council coordinator. If anybody has any motions they haven't put forward today, it'd be helpful if you do so as soon as possible. Thank you very much. This is our last planning committee meeting of 2020. And before we go through the consent agenda, I want to say a few words about the year we've just been through, as is my usual habit. I look back through the notes I prepared for that first meeting of 2020, and back in January, we had big plans with plenty of major policy pieces slated to come before us. Obviously, some of those got delayed as we adjusted to this pandemic and staff shifted focus to COVID-related matters. In early days, our committee couldn't meet regularly and staff faced delays organizing public consultations. So while we were supposed to get a first chance to deliberate on the draft new official plan this year, that has understandably been delayed until early 2021. We also had to adjust the timelines on a few new secondary plans that we were going to discuss. But other than that, we were actually able to address most of the major policy pieces as planned. Given how much chaos the pandemic has caused, that level of productivity was never a certainty. No one expected City Council and its standing committees would all be sidelined quite so effectively in the spring. And I have to say, if we didn't have Ms. Duffany as our committee coordinator, we might have had to push a lot more off our plate. In fact, you know, you will remember, those of you, yeah, there's the cheering section from Councillor Leeper, but honestly, like, you were a pioneer, Melody. I mean, you figured out Zoom and how it could work. And I don't think that you got enough credit for that, because we were in Ontario, we were the only large municipality or even municipality that continued to meet and to take on such challenging subjects, like, for example, the meeting that we had, the 3-day meeting that we had back in, when was that, April? March, no, May. Yeah, I mean, it still is stunning to me that over 100 people had an opportunity to speak as public delegations. So thank you, trailblazer.
We are a small and mighty team in Clerks.
Yeah, and consider yourself having a little plaque that says that now from all of us. And so she and the other coordinators in the clerk's office have done an incredible job getting us back on track. And I know these virtual meetings have required a lot of hard work, but our committee and all of council really owes you a huge thank you, and your team. We've also stayed on course because of the continued efforts of city planning staff, who have worked tirelessly to prepare all the reports we've considered this year. That's no small feat. We've moved a lot of key pieces forward. We set the groundwork for the city's growth management strategy, outlining how much the urban boundary will need to grow to accommodate housing in Ottawa until 2046. We made changes to the rules that govern development in R4 zones to encourage more new low-rise apartments and gradually build up the city's supply of affordable apartments as a way to improve affordability. We adopted bird-friendly design guidelines to help reduce the risk to birds and the number of bird deaths as more new buildings go up across Ottawa. We approved a landscape first zoning strategy to help protect the character of existing streetscapes in older neighborhoods in cases of redevelopment, additions, new infill, and intensification across the urban area. And we approved a spending plan for the $15 million in capital funding that the city committed to create new affordable housing for projects, which includes 558 units in Gladstone Village and Rochester Heights. And of course, beyond these bigger policy pieces, we also dealt with the usual slate of zoning and official plan amendments that make up the bulk of our meetings. It's important that our virtual meetings were set up in a way that still lets residents have a voice in how their city is run. I won't run through every application we considered, but I'll remind you that many require considerable discussions to address the concerns of engaged community members. You might recall, for instance, a lengthy meeting to talk about a proposed redevelopment at St. Mary's Coptic Orthodox Church at Greenbank and Canfield Roads. A proposed multi-building development on Innes Road at LaMarche Avenue also brought us a considerable turnout for an application we ultimately refused. And just last month, we heard from many delegations about first the proposed towers beside the Bayshore Shopping Center, and then the proposed redevelopment of the Canada Golf and Country Club. This committee is a platform for residents to have their voices heard and to engage in the development process. While we often face difficult decisions, we also tend to find ways through deliberation and discourse to satisfy many local concerns and still keep growing. And one thing that, you know, has evolved over the many years is our desire to achieve collaboration even after a decision is made at planning committee. We don't stop. Mr. Mark is excellent at what he does, and each of you contribute to continuing working with an applicant, with the community, to see whether or not there's just something that can get us consensus. And for that, I'd like to thank my colleagues. You always work hard to find a way forward, and it's a pleasure to work with such a committed and engaged team. Our meetings may not always be straightforward, but I feel that this committee makes sure the city grows in ways that are both considered and appropriate. And I can tell you that I thank each and every one of you for what you contribute to the discourse and to the ongoing very heavy workload that is associated with the planning committee. So I also want to thank my vice chair, Glenn Gower, for his help this year. Certainly thank you for the last committee meeting, and thank you for the work that you've taken on over this past year as well. So that sounds like a good opportunity to look at what's on the agenda today. And first of all, after having done the roll call, I'll ask if there's any declaration of interest amongst the committee members. None? Okay, let me see how I can, there, that's better. Confirmation of minutes from agenda 33, November 26, 2020. Is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Okay, we have no one speaking in opposition to the parkland dedication bylaw waiver for Zibi Ontario Development 3 and 4 Booth Street. We do have our GM, Steve Willis, would like to declare a personal conflict on this file and recuse himself from discussion. In his place, should you have any questions, Doug James is going to speak. But we have the applicant who is ready here if you have any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Please use the raise your hand if you do. I'm not seeing any. So Paul Black and Rodney Wiltz, do you need to speak if we're prepared to carry this item?
I do not need to speak.
Okay.
No, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So on parkland dedication bylaw waiver for Zibi, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Item number 2, we do have one speaker in opposition, and this is the zoning bylaw amendment 250 and 252 Hinchy Avenue. Linda Hoad here is to speak against, and then we have the applicant to speak as well. So we'll hold item number 2. Item number 3, we had a lot of communication on this item, but we have no one registered to speak against. This is the zoning bylaw amendment for 1642 Marylville Road. Does anyone have any questions on this item? None? Oh, Councillor Moffat?
Yeah, I just like to say, back in my time when I was quasi-councillor for
College Ward,
I had a chance to meet with Crestview Community Association and Cityview Community Association about this application. And I know that it's kind of been broken up into 2 parts, with the 7-story building and the larger building that's the corner of Viewmount and Merivale being separated out. But I just want to thank staff and the community for submitting their comments and including me in that discussion. I think there's still some stuff to do. I think there's some legitimate concerns with how Viewmount fits into the situation and the lack of dedicated transit on Merivale, because they're all just kind of stuck in with the buses. And I'd like to make sure that, I'd like to hope that that kind of gets considered through site plan and through the next phase of zoning as we move forward on this. I noticed even one resident, this is the kind of the challenge we have with College Ward at the moment. We had one resident just 3 days ago email a former staff member that no longer works in the office. So I think it's a bit of a concern as to where residents go, how they connect. We see that the councillor isn't here today for the application. So it's still something that concerns, even though I haven't had a formal role in almost a year to the day. It was December 10th, 2019, and I moved that motion to recuse myself from that ward. But I think the residents in that area need to know that they can reach out to us if they have concerns, if they want to discuss that application going forward. Thanks.
Okay, and since you started talking, Councillor Eglai has put his hand up, but so should I be holding this item then?
Just a quick comment, Madam Chair, if you would. I don't think it's necessary to hold it. I just wanted to echo what Councillor Moffat said. Early on in this process, I attended a public meeting at Merivale Mall. There were a lot of people there. There were a lot of upset people there. And I just don't know if the lack of delegations here this morning means that staff and the developer have managed to smooth out all those ruffles. Though I do agree with Scott that the splitting of it into 2 certainly has been helpful and has given more room for discussion about the aspects that were troubling. Or again, whether part of the reason we don't have delegations here is because the people in the ward didn't know where to go and didn't necessarily have the right channels of communication to reach out to the planning committee. Again, I would like to echo what Councillor Moffat said, though I think staff has done a good job in working with the community on this. And while not in my ward, it's adjacent to my ward. So like Councillor Moffat, as the site plan approaches, I don't want to speak for him, but if there are things that we can do to assist in this with the community, I think we're both available to be there.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Eglai. I don't think I think Councillor Moffat has removed himself from the area, and you know, I think that the staff absolutely did a great job, because we did receive a lot of communication, and we received communication from your side of Maryville as well. Some names certainly I recognize very well. Let's face it, Maryville Road is Maryville Road. And every time we do anything to it, hopefully we improve it. Hopefully we give more people the opportunity to be on active transportation as opposed to always car related. Remember one of the comments, the communications we received was about where the bus stop is clearly a site plan issue for Viewmont, but where that bus stop is. And I get that. I mean, I've lived in Nepean for way more than half my life, and Maryville Road, boy, oh boy, up until the early 2000s when Barrhaven had nothing, maybe a Canadian Tire was open and the McDonald's in the 90s. Maryville Road was where we went, and really, has it changed much? I think, and I don't want to belabor because we're not holding this item, and we do have two people that are representing the applicant. But I really think that all the times, and I know Councillor Chiarelli and I know yourself have tried to formalize a business group there. If you were to have a strong BIA, I think that what could be done with Maryville Road, it would be quite stunning. And I think it's something that would be worth investing in personally. So kind of a challenge, I've always offered to help with that. And we've got I know that the Barrhaven BIA really tried to help about 5 years ago too. So just something to think about, because it's a large piece of arterial road, but it's fraught with opportunity. So
I appreciate that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. So anyway, give some thought. Let us know. Bree Aird is here from Foten, and Paul Black if needed. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant's representatives? And Bree and Paul, do you want to say anything, or are you good if we carry this item?
Happy to see it carried, Madam Chair. Thank
you. Paul, you're okay?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks. So is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. The next item is being held. We have quite a few speakers in opposition. We have 3 actually. So we're holding number 4, which is the zoning bylaw amendment for 284 King Edward Avenue. The next item, we have speakers. This is the new zoning bylaw proposed work plan. And we have speakers on that. So we're holding number 5. And then number 6 is the amendments to the permanent signs on private property bylaw 2016-326. I've got no one on this. Does anyone have any questions on the amendments to the permanent signs on private property? None. So is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Okay. Then we're right back to the beginning. So we'll go back.
Chair, before you go to the beginning, Councillor Leeper has a motion he would like to introduce.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Leeper.
Thanks, and I haven't seen the text of the motion, but it is a demolition control application for the property that is the gas station and residential buildings to the north at the corner of Holland and Tyndall. The developer needs some help to get those properties demolished as soon as possible. In anticipation of a future development for which are currently no plans. I would strongly ask my colleagues to support me on this one. So therefore, I guess, do I need a waiver on this one? So I'll ask the chair
so we have to vote to add it to the agenda?
Yep.
Melody?
Yes, please.
Am I not? Okay, so it's carried?
Yeah.
Carried.
Yeah.
Carried.
And And on the motion, Carrie?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I find it, can you hear me, Melody?
We can.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so item number 2 is 250 and 252 Henchy Avenue, and we have our planner is Steve Gauthier. Linda Hode is the chair of the zoning committee for Hintonburg Community Association. Linda, I'm sure you're here. All right, you know that you have 5 minutes. That's a great thing about having Linda come forward, because you don't have to lay out any of the rules. She knows them. Linda?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Linda.
Okay, thank you. You received the communication or the formal letter that I sent. The problem with this proposal essentially is the neighborhood character. We were told from the beginning, intensification is going to recognize and respect neighborhood character. And we have, as you know, supported intensification in Hintonburg. We have worked with developers to make the infill they propose more compatible with our neighborhood streets. We haven't always succeeded, but we have, I think, made some progress, and we have improved proposals, both for the developer and the neighbors, and we hope for the eventual residents who are going to occupy the new homes. We're really very disappointed that this applicant cannot adapt this proposal, improved already by recognizing the comments of neighbors and the community association, to recognize and respect the streetscape. I was hoping that the applicant or the planner might be giving you some visual evidence of the streetscape, but this is not like many of the streets in Hintonburg with which you may be familiar. It is not quite as eclectic as many of our streets. This is one of the more, this plan of subdivision on this street and several the neighboring streets was much later than most of the community, 1923, I think. The lots are very consistent in terms of their size. The location of the buildings on the lots is very consistent, unlike many of the older streets where the houses can be at the back of the lot or the front of the lot, practically on the sidewalk. This is a very consistent streetscape, and this particular application, the lot consolidation and the form of the massing of the building proposed simply disrupts what is a very consistent streetscape. And this is of great concern to us. It's going to, we're afraid it will set a precedent for intensification on this street. We're not opposed to intensification. It just needs to be to recognize the existing streetscape. And what we are asking is that the applicant adapt the design, not throw it out or totally change it, to increase the fact that it's one building, but it should look like two. It's occupying two lots, and this proposal doesn't meet the goal of our community design plan, which is what governs it. And we are asking that the applicant be required to do some changes as a condition of approval. It's simply to make it read as two distinct buildings, which the applicant suggests it does, but we disagree. I hope you will get a chance to look at the plans. I guess the architect is here. He'll probably show you the plans. The other aspect of this intensification that concerns us is parking. As you know, in the R4 zones, parking is no longer required. The HCA supports this notion of promoting the active forms of transportation. However, we are now face on this particular block, 2 16-unit apartment buildings with no parking. Around the corner, not far away, is a 33-unit apartment being proposed with 7 units of 7 parking spaces, which would occupy the entire rear yard, which is not something we would hope to see either. But what we think the city can do to make this no parking part of the zoning bylaw more acceptable to neighbors and to residents. On-street permit parking. It needs to be implemented now. We cannot wait, as we had been told earlier, for the official plan, the transportation master plan. It needs to be implemented now. It's a policy the city already has. This should not be a difficult thing to do. And we're asking that that you put on the departments, or ask the department to put on their 2021 work plan some work on on-street permit parking for all of the areas where the new R4 zoning is being implemented. And I would like to add, which came to me after I sent this in, accessory parking. As I understand it, people are not allowed to rent their driveways or existing parking spaces that they're not using to anybody else. It's illegal. This should be reviewed in the R4 zones. There is places for parking. We don't need to add new pavement. We should be making use of any existing parking. Probably not in rear yards, but that would be hard to enforce, at least in driveways. So I would ask you to ask staff to look at revising the bylaw on accessory parking. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Councillor Leeper has a question. Councillor Leeper.
Thanks. And this comes down to, Linda, how the building reads. Is it 1 or 2? The community association is taking a look at the building, and I do hope staff can throw an elevation up, or Ryan can probably fire one over to get the picture online.
We have a presentation to present.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jennifer. So the door is currently to the side of the building, where I think the HCA would like to see the door more central and a clearer bifurcation. Ryan is the architect, and he is absolutely certain that once the landscaping is in and with the architecture that they've used, that it will read as 2. I just want to make sure, Linda, that it's clear that it's not the size of the building that is the key concern, because there is another one of these that is being proposed and will likely pass very nearby on the same street. The HCA is not opposed to a similar building that is being proposed elsewhere on the street, right?
That's correct. It is similar. It is closer to Scott Street, and of course it consolidates a vacant lot with an existing building that will be torn down. And no, it's not the size. This building fits well in terms of meeting, the bylaw requirements. That the height is fine. It's simply the way it reads. It does not, in our view, complement the existing streetscape.
Okay. And I will leave it to members to vote their confidence once they've seen the building. Linda and I have corresponded about this and chatted, and it's kind of a subjective disagreement at this point. So I look forward to Jennifer getting that visual up on screen so you can take a look at it. That's all I had. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Leeper. Okay, Jennifer, your name's been bandied about quite a bit. Jennifer Murray and Ryan Cool. Ryan, I saw you somewhere in the lineup. Have you got that picture for us?
I was expecting that staff might also be putting forward. I'm not sure if staff's going to be actually presenting what the recommendation is, but maybe that will come after.
No.
Okay. So
no,
I just wanted to
presentation on this item, but they do have a.
I think that, so I just wanted to clarify that what is in front of you today is a minor zoning bylaw amendment. So I'm happy to go through a few slides. We do also have a site plan control application in, which would address items such as the location of the door. So I think what the Hintonburg Community Association is talking about is comments on the door location, which it doesn't work what they're asking for, but what's in front of Planning Committee today on the agenda is the minor zoning bylaw amendment. And that deals with essentially 3 very minor items. So I'll just start with context to say that we started this application back in November 2019, talking to staff. The R4 zoning update actually impacts this file significantly. Well, in the sense that there was 3 minor amendments being asked for, and now there is really only 1 when you look at the R4. But we have to look at the zoning that was in place at the time the application was made, which was in March of 2020. So I'm happy, I'm not sure who's controlling the slides, but I'm happy to just, so this shows you the architectural view that Project One has designed, and we have a few slides that sort of show a bit of the context.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this shows we're right in the heart of Hintonburg. We are we're 3 lots away from Scott Street, and we're very close to Tunney's Pasture. Next slide. So we are right, this almost looks like a Venn diagram for the perfect location for transit. So we're 600 meters from both Tunney's Pasture, LRT station, and Bayview. It's very walkable, very transit-oriented kind of development, and there is no parking proposed for this project. And the applicant, I think, is taking a bit of a risk with building a infill like this and choosing to actually look for tenants that will not want parking and will not have a car. Next slide. So this shows a little bit more the local context. The red box shows the 2 33-foot lots that were bought. So originally they actually had an approval for a long semi where they went to committee of adjustment to reduce the rear yard setback. They could have built 2 side-by-side long semis, but I feel that what they are proposing is entirely more appropriate for this lot. And it's more consistent with, I think, where the city's heading with really trying to introduce intensification into these infill or these low-rise stable neighborhoods. This is textbook missing middle, what is being proposed. And I think it's very responsive to the character of the neighborhood. Next slide. So this shows just a bit more planning policy detail. So the site was R4H. It is now under the new zoning R4UB. And we did look at both scenarios even when we made our application. Within the secondary plan, which is the top left slide, it is completely consistent with the secondary plan, the community design plan for the neighborhood. Next slide. This slide shows there are 3 trees that are slated for removal, and originally there was 2 new trees planned. The next slide will show, so we introduced through the discussions with the immediately adjacent neighbors, we've introduced 2 additional new trees. So now there's 5 trees planned for the site. There's no asphalt proposed on the property anywhere. There's interlock and softscaping. Basically, this is what you can do when you don't have a driveway and you don't have parking. So the design to keep, next slide will maybe help show this better. The landscape architect has come up with a design that really respects the 2 original building lots. So they've come up with a completely different kind of tree and landscaping palette for each of the 2 lots. So the next slide shows a lot of landscaping detail.
1 minute.
We don't need to get into, but it's really been done to respect the existing pattern of the street to have 2 different looks for each of the 2 lots. Next slide.
So Jennifer, yeah. You only have 1 minute and you have about 9 slides left.
No, so I don't need all the other slides. Yeah, so I'll show this one. Okay. This is just a few changes that were made. So the balconies, which this did not come up in Linda's comments, but the balconies were moved at the back to be more central to the middle of the building at the rear to address the immediately adjacent neighbors. We added extended 7-foot high fence along the side of the property, which is what the adjacent neighbor wanted. And the next slide will just show the final site plan layout. So the zoning amendment that's before the committee today really just talks about the number of units inside the box. So under the previous zoning, we could do 4 on each of the 2 lots. Under the new zoning, there's 8 allowed on either of the 2 lots. So it's a total of 16, which is what is proposed. But the R4 zoning doesn't contemplate if you have a larger lot that you can do more units under this, in this area. So that's why they need an amendment, is to allow for the 16 units to be built in 1 building instead of in 2 separate buildings. So that's really what's in front of the committee today, is the number of units.
Okay, So we have Councillor Leeper has a question, and then Vice Chair Gower. Councillor Leeper?
Yeah, thanks. And I'm glad the landscaping plan showed up there, Jennifer. We're going to take a look at this building once it is constructed and take a look at whether or not it does read as two different units. It's a leap of faith right now, but we'll be keeping a very, very close eye on how this appears on the street. One thing I did want to bring out, though, was am I correct in thinking that this would eliminate two curb cuts?
Yes. You mean exactly. Curb cuts?
Yeah, so it's taking two driveways out, so that, you know, it will add a little bit of parking. I still want to ask staff about R4 zone permit parking, but I think it's important to highlight that this will actually eliminate two curb cuts, which from a walkability perspective on the street is actually a fairly attractive feature of this. No, that's all I had for you. Just make sure it looks like two different buildings. Thanks.
Actually, could Melody, just can we put up that presentation again and just bring up the rendering? I mean, even the first page of the presentation, or actually, yeah, anyway. So, I mean, from our perspective, architecturally, we've always been surprised to hear this comment, because one of the first things we did in designing this building was to articulate the front as two distinct volumes, two heavy masonry volumes that read differently. So one stands up vertically, has a narrower proportion, makes reference to some of the smaller houses in the neighborhood. The other one has a more horizontal 2.5-story proportion with this really heavy, you can see angled walls that cut back in here. So the reason we did this is twofold. So not only do they read as two separate entities, but we have a lot of relief on the building elevation. And you can see that there's recessed balconies on both corners of the buildings as well. So, you know, if we were building a brick box that was flat, it really wouldn't justify or make a good reference to building in cadence and in line with the fabric of the street that we find now. So the reason that we were expressive, and these are not cheap details to do, was to try to maintain articulation as a modern take on character and rhythm of the street. With these recessed balconies, we more than exceed current R4 requirements for articulation for the building face. You know, we feel like we're doing everything that we should be doing as far as good urban design is concerned to have really expressive and evocative building faces. So we were more than taken aback when we received these comments from the Community Association, because to our mind, and just looking at the way this rendering reads here, it does seem fairly clear that these are two separate volumes. And then the landscaping itself that we spoke of that transitions and makes reference to those two lots, that breaking point in the landscape where it goes from one palette to another is going to align exactly with where we see the start of the shorter brick volume. So this is all being done in a very careful way to have these references back to the fact that originally this was two lots, but we are densifying the zone and responding to, you know, the growth demands of the city and our proximity to public transit.
Okay, Councillor Gower, Vice Chair Gower, did you still want to speak?
I put my hand down because I think my question probably would have elicited a similar response from Ryan. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Moffat?
Thanks. I'm not really sure who this would be to. I just happen to be, subjectivity might be the key word to the entire discussion here, but just looking across the road at the application for 243 and 245, which of course is two lots. Now 243 is currently vacant, so maybe that tilts the scale a bit as to how we look at these things. It's also on the top of the street, the north end. But its design, you know, Ryan just mentioned a flat brick box. It has the central door. It doesn't read as two buildings at all. Jeff already mentioned that building's likely to be approved. I'm curious, the distinction, maybe actually this might be a question for Councillor Leeper, the distinction between the concern about this building not front facing as two buildings. Obviously, Mr. Kuhlwein explained his rationale to why he feels it doesn't, or why it does, sorry. But the application for 243, 245 is absolutely one building and has no effort to make it look like two. So why look at buildings across the road from one another and apply different standards or different opinions toward them?
Yeah, and I can't speak for the community association. There is a subjective disagreement here on the architecture of the building, and frankly, I'm glad that that's what we are discussing. The developer is bringing something in that fits within the envelope of what we anticipate with the new R4 rules that are intended to help us increase the housing supply, increase the amount or increase the affordability of housing in the neighborhood. We had a lot of discussion during the R4 debate about articulation, and this building shows, a lot of articulation, but we have this subjective disagreement as to where the door should be. And it's really difficult for any of us at this table to say we know what the effect of this is going to be. You've got the architect who obviously spends a lot of time thinking about these sorts of issues, saying one thing. You've got a community that is used to infill and is generally very pragmatic and sees what the future holds in a very clear way on the other side. And I'm willing to take in this particular debate. I'm going to be supporting the building. I think the two different landscaping plans are particularly interesting. I'm glad that slide got put on screen, because again, you have the two different treatments. But Scott, I can't tell you whether this building is going to read as 1 or 2, or the building across the street is going to read as 1 or 2. That's why we have architects, and everyone else is free to make up their own minds.
Fair enough. I mean, the good news is for this committee, for it not to rack its brain, the subjectivity of site plan is not a matter for the committee to decide on. We're here to discuss the zoning and the zoning only. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, Steve, do you have anything to add to that? Steve Gauthier, the planner?
The only thing I'd add to add is that it's a very sensitive infill. You can see a fully soft landscape facade. There were good efforts made also with the rear balconies, the screen to the rear balconies. So it meets the general intent of R4 and the new updated infill rules. Staff doesn't have any issues. And I should point out that the draft OP has more support for on-street residential parking. So I couldn't point out exactly the policies right now, but I know that it talks about more support for on-street parking.
Thank you. Anybody else? Sorry. Okay, so thank you, everybody. On the zoning bylaw amendment.
Sorry, for staff, Jen?
Oh, okay, sure, go ahead, Jeff, I didn't see it, sorry.
No worry, and Steve, I appreciate the intervention with respect to the city considering measures to assist in the provision of street parking. I'm just wondering if anyone is available to talk more concretely about that. Many of you probably saw a letter that was sent by the downtown councillors to builders and landlords across the city, asking them to please, when they are renting or selling units in some of these R4 areas particularly, make sure that tenants know that there is no parking available. If you move into one of these buildings and a landlord or a real estate agent tells you that there is street parking available, confirm that with the city before you make the assumption that that is actually true. The downtown councillors, we are frequently flooded with requests from residents who have moved into these dense, intensifying areas on the assumption they can get street parking, and when they can't, unfortunately, it's the councillor who has to deliver that bad news. But with respect to trying to ensure that we are transitioning or looking at the transitional aspects of parking in our neighborhood, I see Doug and David probably ready to address that.
And I should also point out that as part of the site plan control approval for similar developments, we've always inserted a condition where the future occupants are to be notified that there's no parking available. If they're gonna have to park on the street, and there's no guaranteed for parking on the street. So the future occupants are informed, and this is part of the site plan approval.
Without pointing fingers, I know that in some cases that has recently not resulted in good outcomes for new tenants. So, but I'll leave Pied to answer that further.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Doug, you're a little soft.
I was going to say exactly what.
Can't hear you.
Sorry, Doug, we can't hear you.
No.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
No. Do you know semaphore? Is that the only mic you have in the room?
Testing?
There, that's better.
Okay, good. Sorry, I was just going to, we had technical difficulties, sorry about that. I was just going to say, and we can let either Don or David have anything else to say, but in relation to what Steve had mentioned, we do note, and because there's no parking on the property, or there's opportunity for no parking in accordance with the zoning bylaw, that we do put that statement within the site plan control bylaw and reinforce that as part of the approval, that there is no parking, and that you may or may not be in a permit parking area. And of course, there's only so many parking spaces on site for those. So we do let people know about that. I understand it is a concern. One good thing about this, and with the loss of road cuts going down by 2, we have the opportunity to have more on, it's minimal, but it is something, some more on-street parking here. And of course, we always look at trying to increase other modes of transportation so that parking on street or not having it on site is not an issue with respect to proximity to, in this case, 2 LRT sites, and also, enforce the use of walking and alternative modes of transportation. So I understand where the councillor is coming from the things we can do in a planning perspective with applications. We do put those in the site plan and let people know. So we're doing what we can do. I don't know if the gentleman beside me have anything else to add, but no, Madam Chair, that's a response. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what I'm hoping to hear is that with the new R4 rules in place, that the department understands the importance of accelerating a review of permit parking sooner rather than later.
Fair enough. And I think that.
Okay, we can't hear you again, Doug. I see that Vice Chair Gower is taking notes copiously on this, though, because he and I have been texting back and forth about making sure that we formalize that work. Correct, yeah. Vice Chair Gower?
Well, yes, and I'll say this facetiously, we should maybe have a separate parking committee for the number of times parking comes up in planning.
Yeah, you're saying it facetiously, okay? I think we've got enough committees. But listen, why don't you take that aside and have a conversation with Mr. Weiss?
Yes.
Anything else, Councillor Leeper?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so zoning bylaw amendment for 250 and 252 Hinchy. The Planning Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 250 and 252 Hinchy Avenue to permit a 3-story, 16-unit apartment building as detailed in document 2. Is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. So we are going on then to the zoning bylaw amendment for 284 King Edward Avenue, and Vice Chair Gower, have you got the speakers list? I'm just going to ask you to take over that for maybe 5 minutes.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll pull up the speakers list then. Just give me one moment.
Thank you.
Here we go. Whoops. Okay, so we have the zoning bylaw amendment for 284 King Edward Avenue. We have the first speaker is Stephen Cousins.
Vice Chair, it's Councillor Fleury. I wonder if we can get staff to just introduce the item. It'd be bizarre, I think, without that context.
I'd prefer to just rather head right into it, and if there's questions and clarifications, we can visit that in the staff comments, Councillor. Stephen Cousins, are you with us? He is here, Melody?
He's here. He may just be on muting.
Okay. Maybe we'll come back to Stephen. Is Christine Hansen with us right now? We can come back to Stephen next.
Christine is here.
I'm here, yes.
Hi, Christine. So you've got 5 minutes for your presentation, and you can go ahead when you're ready.
Actually, I wasn't planning on presenting. I wanted to have the option to be able to speak or ask questions, that's all.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Is it possible to suggest what Matthew Fleury was suggesting to introduce the issue today?
We're going to go ahead as we usually do. We don't normally do a presentation from staff on the issues at the start of it. All the councillors beforehand have had a chance to review the report. So we'll take the comments from our delegations, including yourself. And then I believe the applicant has a couple of people who are ready to speak if required. And we have staff who can answer questions from councillors as well as we go. So Christine, if you can proceed with your comments.
Again, I just wanted to be able to have the choice to comment throughout the presentation. If there was something that came up, then I felt like I wanted to.
Okay, our procedure for this committee is to give each delegation 5 minutes to make a comment. Okay. And so this is your opportunity now.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm okay. I'll decline right now.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Is Stephen Cousins with us and able to unmute? Okay, we're not hearing from Stephen. Sharon O'Dell is the next speaker on our list for this item.
Hello,
Sharon?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Sharon.
Hi, I'm actually speaking on behalf of Christine and Stephen Cousins. I think they were just wanting to watch.
Okay.
And felt more comfortable if somebody else could speak on behalf of the Clarence Gate community that's here.
Okay,
and,
well, then you can go ahead and you've got 5 minutes for your presentation.
Okay, so I already submitted comments in writing, but these are further questions that I have. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Sharon O'Dell. I'm an Ottawa resident of the Byward Market. And the comments that I sent in before were to Mr. Jean-Charles Renaud on the 28th of September in connection to 284 King Edward Avenue. In summary, within those written comments I submitted, I inquired about the following, and these are the questions on behalf of not just myself, but of those who I'm representing within Lower Town Community Association and the residents of Clarence Gate community. It is also a concern to Heritage Ottawa, the staff of the World War I History at the War Museum, and I've also heard from Councillor Matthew Fleury, who we hope will continue to support us. The first question I have is, why is the bylaw up for change from that which is heritage to allow the building to be placed at risk of complete or partial demolition when the plans of what will be done with that bylaw change? The intent of use has not been given yet. Would this not give a carte blanche for developers to do what they wish to our heritage in the Byward Market? More and more, not just Lower Town, but many public residents in Ottawa are upset about this growing precedent of ask for bylaw to change, no plan in place, and then a surprise plan that happens afterwards. The second question I have is the main application that was placed in was done so by GBA Real Estate Group, who also placed in the heritage study of this architecture and indicated that they felt would be okay to not keep as heritage completely if new construction were to commence, basing their application on the request to change bylaw on that. Is this not bias? Not only is this type of financial property transaction held on an idea that if something is done to make it more lucrative, I will purchase the property, but it also hurts the community of Lower Town if we lose out to someone else's benefits who does not have a further investment of residing here. It's simply a project for them. The third question I have is, what of our heritage in reference to Black culture? This has been a place of worship and meeting place for the Black Haitian community within Lower Town for the last 40 years, and a meeting place aside of the Baptist worship for over 100 years. Renovated not too long ago, the church has been preserved well. The community is glad to hear that the congregation is growing and would like to get a fair amount for the sale of the property to ensure a new church is built, but we disagree when it is at the expense of losing our heritage, especially that which signifies diversity. Parliament buildings can be seen from its location, and we care about what the capital of Canada is saying to all who visit and live here as reflection of Canadian values, and to protect the streetscape that is constantly being eroded. A fourth comment, there are many lots now that are still open and empty for development. On the corner of King Edward Street and St. Patrick is one for sale. On the other side of King Edward, diagonally from 284 King Edward, there is an empty lot. On Clarence Street as well, at the corner of Cumberland, and York Street at the corner of Cumberland. With so many lots open, still some for sale, why does the developer want to change the bylaw on a heritage building still standing? Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. And as we go through the representatives from the applicant as well as staff, we'll allow Councillor Fleury to address any questions you've had to them as we go through. So that's our public delegations for this one. We do have two representatives from Église Évangélique Baptiste d'Ottawa.
Chair, I've got questions for the delegation.
Pardon me. Thank you, Councillor Leeper. I did not have my
no worries.
My panel open for hands up. I'm getting ahead of myself. So Councillor Leeper.
Yeah, so Sharon, sorry, or was that Christine who just spoke? This is a really interesting chicken and egg application, and I'm struggling with it. If the building had its heritage designation in place, would you support the zoning change that is being proposed?
I think that what the public here in Ottawa and the residents around here are thinking is that we don't really have a clear picture as to what the intent is in order to have it changed. So having the heritage in place is wonderful. There is already a heritage overlay, but it is the question of we need more information, more details as to what could possibly happen to it, and for it to not be a wild card for anything to happen. And the other idea is there's so much that is empty now and not built in, that why is it that we're taking down something or possibly amending it to not be what it was intended for as a piece of historical architecture, to then, you know, when you can have it created somewhere else, which is basically an empty lot, which is next door. There's just too much that's not been built, too much empty.
Okay. I mean, the issue of whether or not there are other lots available to develop is it's irrelevant to the considerations that we have here today. You know, this property owner doesn't own those properties. What they want to do is take a look at the future of this property. So one of the scenarios that is potential here is that if this church were designated as heritage, you know, you could see a proposal move forward that sees it preserved as part of I believe it's a 4-story limit at this part of the zoning. So, sorry, 5? 9. So if it received the zoning approval on top of a heritage designation, it could potentially be an adaptive reuse of the existing building into a 9-story building that would have the permitted uses of a traditional main street. Would you be opposed to that?
Well, it would also have to be conflab between the residents that live here and everything, because a 9-story building sounds like it's okay, but all the buildings right now, which are single family homes, and the Champagne Bath that's across, and even the building that I'm representing, which has the 31 units for Clarence Gate community, is only 3 to 4 stories high. So it would be way higher than us. And we were hoping that the church would not be 9 stories with it so close up against it that it would just basically overshadow what it really was before.
I mean, there is the existing zoning in place today. If that building were to be redeveloped, if heritage considerations were put aside, the zoning for King Edward is very different than what the actual buildings that are in place are today. But I definitely hear the concern. Okay, those are my questions of the delegation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, I'm looking for hands. So no more hands for Sharon. Thank you very much, Sharon and Christine and Stephen, for being with us. We have 2 representatives from Église Évangélique Baptiste d'Ottawa. Councillor Fleury, I just saw your hand go up there. Did you have you're good? Okay. 2 representatives from the church, from the Église, Reverend Gordon Bellier and Reverend Guy Pierre Canel. I understand they may be presenting in French, and we do have translation for any committee members or anyone watching who needs that. Are you presenting individually or together? Est-ce que vous êtes ensemble ou deux différentes
So are you going to talk together or separately? Mr. Goward, Conseil Goward, we're here to support our request. I think Mr. Moser, John Moser, will be talking on our behalf. He will be doing our presentation. Maybe to give you a little bit of context and to answer concerns of our neighbors, if needed. Thank you very much. So,
John will give you the floor to offer any comments on this file.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to committee members. I'm speaking on behalf of the church in support of the report from staff that you have in front of you today. Simply put, the church can no longer serve the needs of its congregation and must find a new location in Ottawa. An important step in this process is the application in front of committee today. There are 2 aspects to the application. There's the rezoning of it, but as we've heard this morning, there's certainly heritage issues that do come into play. It's the church has a long history in the neighborhood, and I certainly appreciate the concerns that are raised about the protection of the church. But I guess I just want to remind committee that what's in front of committee today is the rezoning of the site. The site's institutional. The intent is to change that to change it to a traditional Main Street zone. This reflects the existing zone on the site to the south of the property, and it will provide a wider range of permitted uses and hopefully would attract a wider spectrum of potential buyers for the site and the possibility of consolidation with a property adjacent to it or to the west of it. But a place of worship would remain a permitted use with the zoning. As described in the staff report, the proposed zoning is consistent with the provincial policy statement, the objectives and policies of the official plan and the secondary plans of the city. The application in front of you, in my opinion, represents good planning. With respect to the heritage aspects of the church, it is listed on the Heritage Register, and discussions have taken place with heritage staff on the possible designation of the church, either in its entirety or specific elements of the church. But to be clear, the church is in no danger from a heritage perspective. There are no immediate plans to redevelop the site. In fact, just concentrating on the church site, there are a number of factors that come into play that are protecting it. The site is small. It literally has no redevelopment potential on its own. it has to be consolidated. And why it's constrained is because of zoning provisions, the height provisions. There's a view plane that runs through the site. And also, the church does not have a new location. Been looking for a new location through the advisors that the church has. So certainly there is the time factor related to that. A new location may need a rezoning. There aren't a lot of zones where churches are permitted use. And then there's the whole need to either renovate an existing building that's purchased or to build a new church. But what the proposed zoning would do would permit opportunity for the sale of the property to a subsequent owner as it exists, as the building exists today, and really has with it an expanded list of permitted uses. The only redevelopment of the site will take place in the context of a much larger site, an assembly with properties to the south and north. There is no immediate threat to the church, and certainly designation should take place in conjunction with a future redevelopment proposal. So thank you for your attention, Chair and committee members, and just wanted to thank staff for the professional and timely work they've done on this file. And also to Councillor Fleury has certainly helped in terms of helping to identify sites that may be possible for the church. So thank you very much. I'd be pleased to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. So we have Mr. Moser, we have Reverend Pierre Canel, and we have Reverend Bellier who are available for questions from the committee. Tous les trois sont ici pour répondre aux questions, et on a le conseiller Fleury.
So we have John Moser here and the reverends, the pastors, to answer your questions. Conseiller Fleury. First of all, thank you very much to the congregation. Thank you, reverends. We've been having good discussions in the past months. We recognize your contributions and also the increased popularity of your site, and that you have to find an appropriate location to receive everyone who wants to participate. And I recognize also the comments of John Moser. This building does not increase the risk, but will just with the allegation.
My question to you is, as you've been in planning for a number of years, you and I worked on a number of files. I have a very similar issue, if you will, that's happened at the corner of Range and Laurier East. That's the Egyptian embassy, where the Egypt embassy said, you know what, the city was conducting a heritage conservation district, and city staff at the time, former heritage planner, decided to say, no, we're going to do it as a standalone application. And ultimately, it's not included in the HCD for Sandy Hill. And I don't know if you've gone by the site today, but it's quite challenging. What was to be hoped to protect the corner building is ultimately just the retaining of small portions of two walls. So I want to understand, I'm not a heritage expert, I'm not a planning expert. I recognize the wishes and the aspirations of the congregation. What is the issue with proceeding at the same time as a rezoning as a designation of that parcel?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure who the council is addressing that to, but I think it's just, as I say, we're dealing with the zoning today. I think it's appropriate to look at the designation in the context of a redevelopment of the site, because the site isn't going to redevelop on its own. And I think there's more opportunities to be able to incorporate the church in its entirety or portions of it in a redevelopment. It'll be a mixed use development. You know, the Lower Town Plan speaks to, you know, residential mixed uses along the that area of the of King Edward. So I think there's no threat, and I don't think we have to rush into designation nothing is going to happen until this is part of a redevelopment site. And also, as staff says in the report, we have the section of the Planning Act that if a demolition permit is applied for, the city has 60 days to react. Between the information provided by the heritage consultant that was hired by the church and discussions that were with the work that the heritage staff has done, certainly staff would be able to react quickly if there all of a sudden, for some reason, a demolition permit was brought forward. There's no intention to do that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the answer. I have no issues with the rezoning. I have an issue with the rezoning as a standalone without a designation, because when a future owner looks at the site, they look at the value they can have today, and I understand the needs of the congregation. I understand the efforts of consultation. To me, it's a process issue. That what's the issue with being upfront and tying it all? Anyhow, Mr. Moser, I appreciate your answer. I'll be asking a number of questions to staff on the matter.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Leeper.
Yeah, thank you. And John, I understand why your client wants to proceed in this fashion. The potential sale price on the property of having the new zoning in place, but with no designation in place, is significantly higher than the property would be worth if there is a designation in place and a rezoning in place. Why not proceed with both at the same time to provide both your client and the community with some certainty that there is an adaptive reuse potential here with the intensification that the zoning anticipates?
I guess just to reiterate what I said to Councillor Fleury, Chair, is that, I'm not a real estate expert, but I do know that when someone's looking to consolidate the site that's around it, they're going to do their due diligence. They will know that they will see this report that's gone to committee. They'll know that there's significance. It's on the Heritage Register list. So, I think anyone that comes in and consolidated will be well aware of the city's processes, well aware that there's going to be those discussions that are going to take place in terms of redevelopment. And so I don't feel anybody's going to not be aware of this. The sale is certainly going to, the purchase is going to involve a discussion with the city on it. So I don't think anybody's going to come into it with not knowing what the significance of the building.
Understood, but there's still no certainty. And I mean, the potential for lot consolidation here is obviously really significant. I don't know who owns the Granite building to the south, but presumably that is a development play. That's not going to be a Granite store for very long, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But any offer on the Granite and on the church is going to be conditional on not having a heritage hurdle to redeveloping the site to its maximum potential. And then that gets the city into a scramble of making a decision as quickly as possible on a designation. This doesn't seem like orderly planning. If it is the city's intention that the church be retained in some form, we should be designating that now. What is your likely reaction to a designation process today?
Well, Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, we certainly have had discussions with the Heritage staff. There's certainly, we know there's reasons, there's criteria for designation. The church meets that on a number of fronts. And we just felt that going forward with the zoning, which is in front of committee today, could be done separately from the designation. There's no threat to the church. It's going to take considerable amount of time to find a new site because the church is not moving to a new church until they have a facility. I mean, they're not going to sell the site until they know exactly when and where they're going to move. So I just feel there's time is on everyone's side in this issue, and not avoiding the issue, but would just like to be able to do it in the context of the redevelopment, because then you can see how it's going to blend into the new development. Hopefully would be, showcased in the redevelopment. And I think it gives everyone a better opportunity to integrate it into a new site.
Okay. I think if we were to approve this today, all of the advantages accrue to your client, while leaving a still very uncertain path ahead for residents. I'll look forward to Councillor Fleury's discussion with staff on that. But I didn't hear you say that you would support a designation today. Is that correct?
My opinion would be no, and the church can speak to it too, but in certainly our discussions with our client, I think that they're not, again, they know it's an issue, but I think they would like to wait to be able to have it reviewed in a broader context.
Okay. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. It's always good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, there's no more questions here from our committee members, so we're going to move on to questions from staff. We do have Jean-Charles Swinot, the planner, as well as Leslie Collins and Mackenzie Kim from the Heritage group within the planning department. So do we have any questions for staff? Councillor Leeper.
Yeah, I think for the staff, I mean, I've read the report, but can I just hear again on the heritage criteria? If we were to request a designation, where would that likely end up?
Do we have Leslie or Mackenzie who can address that?
I think Mackenzie was on their way.
Sorry, can everyone hear me?
Thanks, yep.
Okay, great. Thank you for the question. So I think from a heritage perspective, as the applicant has mentioned, this property is on the Heritage Register, was added in 2017. Staff have indicated to the applicant and to the community that this property would probably merit designation under Part 4. And I would say that we are well underway with the research and well positioned to move forward with the designation, but we're not quite there yet. And as discussed already, we've had a series of positive conversations with the applicant about their long-term plans. And in terms of, how this is brought forward together with the development application, we have found it to be very collaborative and a much more collaborative and effective process to be able to, respond to an actual development as opposed to only a change in use, and be able to discuss how the heritage value of a building can be highlighted as part of that proposal. So we have several other examples where we've taken that approach and they've proven to be quite successful. The most recent one that comes to mind is the Standard Bread Company building at 951 Gladstone.
Yep. And that has been a positive experience, and I don't think that you see any of the heritage advocates for Standard Bread pushing back at any of the compromises that might be made. But ideally, we make these heritage designation decisions independent of development decisions. The building is either or it is not worth designating and preserving on the merits of the test that you apply. My frustration is that these designation discussions come up when all of a sudden something is under threat. And too often the heritage designations are seen as a way of combating an intensification play. And that's not the discussion we should be having around heritage. So is there a formal request in at this point to designate the building that would require you to undertake that work?
Yes, we city staff received a request from the Lower Town Community Association back in 2014. It included a number of other properties as well for designation, and those included the Adath Just Run Synagogue at 375 King Edward, also the hydro substation, and those have already been designated.
Yeah.
And so we have started on the research for this property, and as I said, it has been added to the register.
Okay. What sort of a time frame until there's a designation report in front of the subcommittee?
Well, as I mentioned, we've had some of those conversations with the applicant already, and we have agreed to hold off on moving forward with the designation until there's some more known about the potential redevelopment in the future.
Right. So the future designation at this point, staff consider is tied to a development play, which is, I think, the wrong approach. But I appreciate the transparency there. Chair, those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. I did see Councillor Fleury's hand up a little earlier. Councillor Fleury, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Moffat had his hand up before, so I don't know. He's not at his desk. So I think we're all of the same intent. I think where we don't agree where I don't agree with staff is that let's be upfront, let's be coordinated, let's consider the rezoning at the same time as the designation. Mackenzie's already confirmed that the designation review is underway. I think not pulling both together or not considering a designation prior to the rezoning in the context of that creates a bizarre anomaly. So I want to ask from a procedural point of view, if we were to ask for a designation to proceed ahead of your consideration today, how does that work procedurally? So is the report tabled? Is it sent to Build Heritage? Like, how does it work procedurally? I'm unclear about
that. Mr. Chair, it's Tim Mark speaking. If there were a desire to have the designation brought forward, then there would be before the zoning is dealt with, then there would have to be a motion to defer the zoning until the designation report is brought forward to Build Heritage and Planning Committee. When it is brought forward, because it's not, you would not be deferring it to a time certain, notice would have to be given again of the zoning bylaw report.
Okay, so I guess, whoa, I got a feedback here. I'm clear about Mr. Mark's comments. I guess I would look to committee members, as I'm not a committee member, to move that motion on my behalf. I don't think there are concerns with the rezoning, but I think it needs to be in the context of the intention, which is a designation. I want to thank the applicant. There are absolutely no issues with the applicant. The issue is with the future risk as this property will be put to market and the future intentions of whoever purchases that or neighboring sites.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. Sorry, I stepped away for a sec there, but I did have my hand up like Councillor Fleury had mentioned. Sorry about that. Just hard not to look at this one without thinking of it's different. It's nearby. It's same ward, but no, sorry, it's not the same ward, but it's different to a degree. But it's the St. Charles Church. Yeah, it is the same ward. So the St. Charles Church from a few years ago, when we had that designation, I think we know how these applicants feel when we move to designate. The owners of the St. Charles Church at the time opposed designation because they felt what it would do to the value of the building. It sold for $4 million. There's a building going up next to the church. The church was preserved. The church was designated, and the new owner had to then go through the zoning process, which we're seeing now. Now it's a different timeline, right? You're talking about zoning and then designation. The Heritage Register is an important piece in this, though, and that wasn't necessarily at play a few years ago. And I think the Heritage Register provides that protection against the fear of demolition. I think it would be the most ignorant of developer that would actually buy this church with the assumption that they could tear it down. Staff, Mackenzie had mentioned the steps that they're taking to look at the background of this. I think we likely know as a council that this church will be designated. When that happens, I don't know if it plays a significant role in our decision today, because ultimately, whether the steps go one before the other, like with St. Charles, or they go this way, which is somewhat backwards, ultimately, I think the outcome of both would be the same. Thanks.
Councillor Leeper on a second round. Councillor.
Thanks. And I'd like to think Scott is right, but I'm not. I don't have a lot of confidence that the process will roll out as cleanly as it should in theory. My question, though, for Mr. Mark is, we could try to table this motion, but I believe the applicant has a statutory right to have the application considered by this committee.
Mr. Chair, the applicant would have the ability to appeal it on the basis of the 90-day time frame, undoubtedly, if the matter were deferred.
I'm not sure that they necessarily would. I mean, it's a church, but if they can hire Graham Burden Associates to bring forward a rezoning like this, I don't want to underestimate the resources they can bring to the table. I mean, my own feeling is that if committee considers that we should be pursuing this process differently, that we should reject the application today for the rezoning, wait for the application. We know that whatever goes in is not going to be built as of right, even to whatever TM zoning would be passed hypothetically today, that it's going to require any number of changes from the existing TM zoning. So we're going to be asked to do rezoning on this in future anyways, especially if there's any kind of significant lot consolidation, because I believe there's a lot of process still to come. I think this process, councillors, is premature, and I would encourage you to reject it, and I would encourage the developer to come back to us with this request when we understand the fate of the church.
I see Councillor Fleury has his hand up. I do want to ask staff just a clarifying question, because we're talking a lot about uncertainty. Mackenzie has already addressed it, but I just want to make sure we clarify. If there ever was a request to demolish this building, there's a 60-day window because it's on the Heritage Register right now. Is staff in a position to evaluate this building for designation and get it in front of Build Heritage and then council within that 60-day time frame if a request for demolition could occur? Is there any doubt that staff any reason staff would not be able to complete that in a 60-day time frame? I'm also cognizant that we're going into a bit of a Christmas break here where committees and council aren't meeting regularly.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. I think in this case, the 60 days can certainly be a scramble, but as I mentioned, in this case, we are well positioned. If a demolition notice were to be submitted, I think the 60 days would be enough time for staff to initiate that designation process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fleury.
Yeah, so I'm looking for a colleague on planning committee to move the referral as per Tim Mark's description of the process, not in opposition to the zoning, but really to do it, full force, which is there is an intent to designate. Staff have begun the work. Let's put the rezoning on hold until the designation is brought forward, and then let's bring both back to planning committee in a review. That's ultimately what I'm looking for. I don't, there are very little risk under this current ownership and church group. The issue is future intents upon sale or upon purchase. So I'd like us to do it right in a package form, and I think that would protect the community and Heritage Ottawa's intent in this regard.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Looking for hands. Councillor Leeper.
Thanks. I would just ask Councillor Fleury, if that motion were brought forward, are you confident that the applicant wouldn't exercise their statutory power to have a decision from committee within the 120 days of the application?
We've worked well with the applicant, so to me, it's not a question of appeal. We've worked well. They've engaged with the community. This is not a threat today. I just think it's the right way to do it is to ensure that both the zoning are considered with the level of designation that's considered by staff. I just think it's doing both together. So I'm not worried about the applicant. I think they work in the community's interest. It's just to me, it sends the wrong signal if there was a quick sale of it, which we can't really predict.
So, Chair, I'll move the deferral that Councillor Fleury is seeking, and I'll be in deferral until such time as there is a designation, and I'll be in the clerk and Mr. Mark's hands as to. Oh, you're the best. I will so move. Thank you.
I would like to check with Mr. Mark just on any legal issues with the deferral motion that we haven't covered already in the discussion, Mr. Mark, that you wish to raise?
No, Mr. Chair. The one risk is the one identified by Councillor Leeper, which is that someone could appeal it under the 90-day rule.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other speakers on this item? I'd like to call for a vote then on Councillor Leeper's motion for deferral. Can we do yeas and nays on this, Melody, if you can call it the names?
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
No.
Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington.
No.
Councillor Kitts.
No.
Councillor Moffat.
No.
Councillor Hughley.
No.
Vice Chair Gower.
No.
Chair Harder.
No.
2 yeas, 7 nays.
Okay, then on the staff recommendations, are those carried?
Dissent.
Okay, thank you. And I see Chair Harder is back, so I'll pass things back over to her. Welcome back.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gower. So on the report of 284 King Edward Avenue, the Planning Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 284 King Edward Avenue to change the zoning from institutional to traditional Main Street as detailed in document 2. Is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you, everybody.
Dissent, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Noted. Our last item that is held is the new zoning bylaw proposed work plan. We have 3 speakers speaking on that. David Weiss is our program manager on really all zoning, and he's here with us. David, Melody, if you have just anything, I know that they had prepared something if we need to, if there's a 1-page or anything that they'd like to put up, go ahead. I just want to mention to everybody that while I was not active in the meeting, I did hear from Councillor Shirelli who was trying to get on to Zoom but could not. And of course, as you know, we had already carried that item on Marable Road. So he did get onto Zoom. Some of you might have seen him, but I did suggest that because he's got lots of time to submit comments prior to council at the end of January, he's going to submit those comments in support of his community. I suggested, by the middle of January, so they can be part of the council report going forward. So Melody, you'll be keeping an eye out for that, okay? So this item is the new zoning bylaw proposed work plan. And we have 3 speakers, as I mentioned. The first delegation is Robert Brinker. We also had a written correspondence from Jason Berggraf, who's the Executive Director of the Greater Ottawa Home Builders. But right now we have Robert Brinker, who's the Vice President and Chair of the FCA Planning and Zoning Committee. Are you there? Are you there, Robert?
Yes, I am. Hello, Madam Chair and councillors.
Hello. You have 5 minutes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. I am the chair of the FCA Planning and Zoning Committee and would like to share our comments with you regarding the proposed work plan. As you are aware, a central FCA tenet is that neighborhoods matter for all members and community associations. As volunteers and committed participants in the planning process, we know our communities and have a vested interest in future development and changes that will affect our neighborhoods. We are fully aware that the new official plan and the new comprehensive zoning bylaw will change the way we will see and envision the evolvement of our city for the next decades to come. We are asking to be included in the early stages of the drafting of the new zoning bylaw together with the industry, like the official plan working group has done. This early engagement, including the big moves and quick hits, is essential for the acceptance of the bylaw. Every neighborhood is different, and we must be sure that that approach is balanced in order to account for the fact that communities and their characters throughout the city are different. A living city must distinguish through a surgical tool like the zoning bylaw that not only is a hand different than an arm, but that each finger on each hand is different, and that is these differences that allow them to work together efficiently as a hand. The zoning bylaw is the most finely grained planning tool we have. We must use it to address each community future growth and each community character. Will we like every part and every change of the new comprehensive zoning bylaw? No, for sure not. But having different opinions and coming together to develop the most livable mid-sized city should be our common goal. The development of a 3D-based application to assist with planning application should be a priority. The requirement to share a 3D model will become a standard practice and will save time for every participant. Thank you, Madam Chair and councillors, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Brinker. Appreciate you coming out today. I don't see anyone waving at me. So Murray Chown is next with 5 minutes. Murray's here speaking on behalf of the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association. Following Murray is Rosalind Hill. Go ahead, Murray.
So thank you, Madam Chair. And as you've indicated to the committee members, you will have received a letter that's prepared by the Executive Director of the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association. And I guess I'm privileged to attend or appear before you this morning just to highlight a couple of things in that letter. The first, so actually it'll be 3 things. Firstly, we would encourage staff to look at every opportunities to accelerate this process. I think that we're anxious to reach a point where we have a new zoning bylaw in place that will facilitate development to meet the goals as set out by council when they adopted the growth management strategy in May. And the industry is certainly will be dependent upon that new zoning bylaw in order to help the city realize those goals and start to move towards a greater level of development through intensification. We're only going to get there with the assistance of a new zoning bylaw that facilitates that development. The second thing I want to raise is consistent actually with the comments from Mr. Brinker on behalf of the FCA. I think it's critical that the industry be a partner with staff as they move forward with the writing of a new zoning bylaw. At the end of the day, it's the industry that actually has to build something in conformity with the performance provisions of a new zoning bylaw. And so we need to make sure that it's something that's workable and something that's actually going to achieve the goals of the growth management strategy and of the official plan once it's been adopted by council. The last comment we have, which I hope will intrigue the members of committee, is this. We don't want to be in a situation where collectively, we, the FCA, staff, all other interested parties, spend 3 or 4 years writing a zoning bylaw that's then adopted by council, and we then discover that it doesn't work. We're looking at a brand new style of zoning bylaw. We're looking at a form-based zoning bylaw rather than a bylaw that's based on typologies. Certainly the City of Ottawa has never had a zoning bylaw that's based on building form rather than building typologies. Staff may tell you that this may be the first bylaw in the province that takes that approach. So it's new territory. And we don't want to be in a situation where 4 or 5 years down the road, we've adopted a bylaw, put it into full force and effect, and then it doesn't work. And when I say it doesn't work, what I mean is that we aren't actually able to move applications through the process of approval without having all sorts of difficulties meeting the performance standards of the zoning bylaw or the requirements of the zoning bylaw as it's set out. So our suggestion to committee and to staff is let's do a test run. Staff in their work program have talked about bringing forward some zoning amendments late in 2021 or early 2022. We would suggest and recommend to the city that what they bring, one of the things, and maybe the only thing, that they bring forward in January of 2022 would be a test zoning for 1 or 2 neighborhoods where we can explore this notion of form-based zoning for the first time and see if we can make it work so that we have confidence when we bring forward a bylaw for the entire city 4 years down the road that we've got confidence that it's going to work. That is something we'd like you to chew on and maybe provide direction to staff. Happy to work with staff over the next 12 months to actually do this so that we can have some confidence that the comprehensive zoning bylaw, when it's adopted in 4 or 5 years, is a planning tool that we can all work with. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Murray. We do have a couple of questions for you, Councillor Leeper and then Councillor Moffat. Councillor Leeper.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Murray. How are you doing?
Great.
Great. So my concern with the quick hits report in the 4th quarter of 2021 is I anticipate that staff are going to want to put in place some reasonably significant changes to some of the neighborhoods in an effort to do exactly what you're describing, which is to pilot some directions. And you and I'm seeing Rosalind on the screen here as well, have been heavily involved with the Westboro infill study, which I'm going to suggest is an interesting pilot project, assuming it passes early next year, for new zoning, form-based zoning for the mature neighborhood R3s. That infill study has been the result of 2 years of consultation, and that level of consultation has been important given the nature of the changes that it's going to make. It sounds good to say, let's get some quick hit pilot projects underway. My concern is that they'll be done without adequate consultation with the neighborhoods involved. And I'm also concerned that they would, much as we've seen with the R4 zoning, for example, in advance of the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, once again be intensification in the core without touching the areas that are further afield. What, in your mind, are those quick hit pilot projects that you're advocating for, and what is the appropriate level of consultation with the public that is necessary to achieve those?
Councillor, those are certainly very appropriate questions, and you're correct that myself and Rosalind, who will be speaking in a moment, have been heavily involved in the Westboro Interim Control Review, and I appreciate you say it's taken 2 years, and actually it's going to be a little more than 2 years by the time the report gets to Planning Committee in February. It didn't get off to a very quick start, quite frankly. I think there was probably 6 months at the beginning of the process where absolutely nothing happened. So can we do it in a year? I think we can. I think we can do it in a year if we pick a neighborhood that's already contemplating this, and I know that Rosalind can speak to this, but she's worked with a couple of neighborhoods in terms of testing this approach or some of the approaches associated with form-based zoning, so that it wouldn't be a new concept to a couple of neighborhoods that we could explore. I think we can do this in a year. I think it's appropriate for us to try to do it in a year. Obviously, it's going to involve heavy public consultation early on, but I think it can be done. And when we talk about, the quick hits report, I've had a brief conversation with Mr. Wise and Mr. Herwire about that notion. It's not entirely clear to me yet what those quick hits might be, because I'm not sure it's worth our while bringing further amendments to bylaw 2008-250 in an attempt to kind of patch it up. I think anybody in the industry will tell you the bylaw is burdensome at best to read, and just adding more to it is not going to be constructive. I think we need to move forward with something, with a new bylaw. So I would be, it may be a freestanding or an independent bylaw that would apply to this neighborhood, whatever neighborhood it is, if we can do that. The Westboro exercise, we've worked closely with you and your office and the community and staff, is an interesting move in the right direction in terms of intensification, but it hasn't dealt with form-based zoning. It's still a zoning bylaw, and the amendments are still based on housing typologies. It still talks about where our triplex is going to be permitted, where our low-rise apartment is going to be permitted, where our townhouse is going to be permitted. That's not a form-based bylaw, zoning bylaw. So it would have been great to go down that path in Westboro, but I don't think we're ready to do that. I'm hoping we're ready to do that now.
Okay. What, in terms of a pilot project, what do you think the role of the Committee of Adjustment would be? One of the things that I'm looking forward to in the Westboro infill study is that we're going to put in place infill rules that are clear to the Committee of Adjustment. This is what we intend, and we haven't had those rules for 20 years now. And maybe this is a coffee discussion, but yes. What is the relationship between the city, the builders, residents, and the Committee of Adjustment if we're trying to try something? Do we want
you and I could probably spend half an hour talking about the Committee of Adjustment, but let me give you the simple answer. If we could avoid going to the Committee of Adjustment on our development applications, we would absolutely do that. It's a risky and unpredictable process for the industry, and we'd rather not be going there.
Do the quick hits report need some sort of language to the Committee of Adjustment to say hands off for a while? We want to see how this works.
I'm not sure you can do that.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting too abstract now. Chair, I will let us get back to the realm of the practical. Thank you.
Oh, listen, I think that there's no doubt amongst most of us that the next 2 to 4 years are going to be so important from a policy perspective. And, you know, as I think it's next September, we'll be finalizing the official plan, but wow, so much work, so much to get right and starting right now. So, and Vice Chair Gower is going to be taking the lead on that. Lucky Vice Chair Gower. Councillor Moffat, questions of Murray?
Yeah, thanks. I think, you know, when we did the discussion back in May, I was pretty much a broken record on saying that this council needs to put its stamp on zoning. We can't put it off. We can't be the ones that approve, you know, boldness and ambition in the OP and then just leave it to another council to implement a zoning bylaw, which we know likely will be impacted by politics and community input that might veer away from where we stood in 2020 on intensification. The longer we wait, the more difficult it's going to be to hit those targets, and the more likelihood that we'll actually be expanding the boundary even further in the 2030s. So when you're talking about, I just want to be clear, are you suggesting that instead of the quick hits, we narrow the focus? Because I think the quick hits needs to be broad, but are you suggesting we actually narrow it down to maybe just one neighborhood in order to then delay further implementation to 4 or 5 years from now?
So, Councillor, I'm not sure I can answer that question because, as I say, I'm not entirely clear what the quick hits actually are. And so depending upon what staff response is on the quick hits, then maybe I can better answer your question as to which is more important. And I know that I did have a quick email from Mr. Wise raising a concern about, you know, what gives in terms of their work program if they're going to initiate this kind of test amendment. But I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know what the quick hits are. But you know, the residential component of the zoning bylaw is the most, I will say this bluntly, I think it's the most important part of the bylaw going forward, and it's going to be really important to get it right. So if there's some way we can do something sooner than later, so council, community associations, the industry all understand, okay, when the new bylaw comes out in 4 years, this is what it's going to look like. The Westboro interim control study isn't that example. It could have been, but it's not. And I don't blame anybody for that. I think that we were well down the road in terms of where that was going before we really got committed to form-based zoning. But so I don't know what the give is in our ask, so I can't really answer your question.
My concern is that this council isn't held to account for its targets, because it's going to be very easy for the next council to say, that's not our OP. This council needs to make a decision on big zoning implementation policy in order to achieve these targets in the near future. Otherwise, you put it off and you don't go anywhere. We're still working on a 2008 zoning bylaw from a 2003 official plan. We can't keep on pushing this stuff off. We have to make important decisions in the near term, not just the long term.
I would agree with you 100% on that, Councillor Moffat. So it would help to better understand what those quick hits are to ensure that commitment going forward.
Is that it? That's it?
I had a quick follow-up.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Councillor Leeper. We do have another speaker, Councillor Leeper, if you wanted to save it for Rosalind.
No, I just wanted to explore what Councillor Moffat is saying. Obviously, I agree with you, Scott, that we need to have some significant direction in zoning coming out of this term of council. But I wonder how realistic, you're not suggesting it would be realistic to have a new comprehensive zoning bylaw in place by October 2022.
Let's ask Mr. Weiss that.
Fair enough.
Mr. Weiss?
Like Jeff and I need our own like fireside chat committee.
Yeah,
where we just go back and forth for hours on end.
Yeah, with Vice Chair Gower too. He can be the net minder as the volleys go back and forth.
Madam Chair, that's a big question to unpack. What part would you like me to unpack first?
Whatever you want to.
Okay, well, first off, in response to what the quick hits are. So let's just go into that. Number one, quick hits. We have an existing zoning bylaw that is long in the tooth. That is an amalgamation of a whole bunch of stuff, and it has got over 4,000 exceptions, hundreds of schedules and overlays. There's an awful lot of cleaning up and basically straightening up the deck work that needs to happen before we can really start cleaning up and starting moving in a new direction. So one of the things that that we want to do is we want to go after the stuff that is really the low-hanging fruit that we can clean up mighty fast. For example, part 4, the parking and mobility section. Good Lord, you need a PhD to be able to work your way through it, but that is not rocket science stuff. And so we'd like to take a shot at cleaning up that parking mobility section, get that out of the way, get that cleaned up so we can move on to more important things. Stuff like home-based businesses rules, secondary dwelling units, maximum parking near transit stations. Those are all fairly low-hanging fruit that should be fairly easily and fairly readily easy to resolve. So that's what we mean by quick hits. We mean stuff that is broken now, that can be fixed quite quickly, and that needs to be fixed very quickly, and it doesn't need to hang around for the time that it takes to get the rest of the zoning bylaw done. So that's just a little piece of it. The other piece of this as well too is that we know that we have an evolving draft official plan that has just gone public. It is going to go through its own process over the course of the next year. It will be going along in sync with the growth management strategy. And we know that those policies are going to be being adjusted as they go along. Of course, no plan survives contact without some amendments and whatnot. And so there are going to be some pieces of that official plan and pieces of the growth management strategy that roll through that we are going to need to enact sooner than later as well too. Exactly what those pieces are right now, I don't know. So we need to be keeping track of what's happening with the new official plan and as the growth management strategy discussion unfolds to understand exactly what we're going to need to bring forward. The second piece that I want to talk about is to Councillor Moffat's discussion about putting a stamp, putting a spark on this. I would say very bluntly that there is no way to rewrite a zoning bylaw for a city of 1 million people within this term of council. But what we intend to do with respect to the Big Moves report at the end of next year is very clearly lay out the direction that we intend to go through the zoning bylaw. There are going to be some very big and very hard decisions that need to be made with respect to how we take the policy that is going to be laid out in the official plan and roll that down on a lot by lot basis directly into neighborhoods. Very, very clear and very hard decisions that need to be made so that my team can do the hard work that they need to do, roll up their sleeves and get it done. So I think that those the Big Moves report next year is going to be a big opportunity. And that's what it says in the report. It's a big move. The opportunity for council to really clearly articulate what it wants out of the zoning bylaw so that we can make that happen. That's our intention.
Well done. I don't know if that's, yeah, guess what? Councillor Leeper's back up. Councillor Leeper. Oh, you just forgot to, okay. That's great, David. I don't know whether you have shocked people but I do know that you've given them a lot to think about. We certainly, you know what, we don't even have that much time to think about it because, you know, you need us in sync with you. Rosalind Hill, you're up next. Thank you. You have 5 minutes. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for allowing me time to speak. So my name is Rosalind Hill. I'm the principal architect at Rosalind J. Hill Architect, Inc. I'm one of the co-founders of Walkable Ottawa. And over the last couple of years, I've been studying the development patterns in neighborhoods and the role of zoning in forming and triggering development patterns. And I think that it's critically important as we move forward with such a new and actually wonderful approach to zoning for our neighborhoods, to be sure that we do two things in advance, not just test it, but model it. So when we have new zoning ideas, there's no need to test them in real life before we've modeled the impacts on paper. It's important and responsible that we do that. So understanding if we have an idea of a zoning bylaw to put in place, we need to go through the work of understanding, given the bylaw proposed, the construction economies, the building code, market demand, what housing will actually be produced, what will actually be built, and where will it be built, what types of housing and for what demographics. We can produce that information and model those pieces of the puzzle in advance of rolling out a zoning bylaw and testing it in real life. And it's important that we do that. With Walkable Ottawa, I've been running some neighborhood workshops to help little pieces of neighborhood understand what their neighborhood would look like if it evolved to be fully walkable in the terms of like a modal shift from car dependence to walkability. In the draft official plan, we see that the city's targeting the transforming overlay and the evolving overlay for that kind of regeneration and that kind of modal shift. And in those areas, it's important for us to focus our efforts and our modeling efforts to help people to understand what is that going to mean for our neighborhood streets in particular. And so when I think about the low-hanging fruit here, or the quick hits, the quick hit, I believe, is those regenerating neighborhoods. We can provide a new zoning, so depart from the old, a new zoning that stands on its own for those regenerating neighborhoods, for the residential streets and the small commercial veins in those regenerating neighborhoods. We can model it so that we know what the impact would be, and then we can test it. That work can be done, so we can prepare that piece of bylaw. So not for the whole city, just for those regenerating neighborhoods. We can prepare that in a year with adequate community consultation, but only with the use of modeling, because that skips over that part of the consultation that is very abstract and difficult for people to understand and engage, and gets you right to the heart of the issues, allowing you to understand the impact and respond to them. Modeling also can generate images for people to look at so they can see what would this look like in my neighborhood, so that the consultation actually moves, light speed faster than consultation, our normal approach to consultation. And this is something that I have tested. I've got a full report of the study that I did in Overbrook with a group of residents in Overbrook. It is efficient and it's effective, and it allowed those participants to feel that they were really involved. They felt engaged and they felt good about the result. And that model exercise was grounded in form-based zoning. So I would hope that we could revise this plan to include that kind of modeling, and to include a test area for neighborhood zoning in regenerating neighborhood. And it needs to cover a patch of neighborhood that would have a small commercial vein in it, a patch of development that is at a 2.5-story standard height and zoned that way for now, and another patch or area that's at a 3.5-story height, and test those three pieces of the puzzle before being able to apply that zoning across the entire regenerating area. And it's excellent that the Committee of Adjustment would be involved in that test. We want to know what the Committee of Adjustment will do with that zoning. The potential zoning for form-based zoning would be vastly, vastly more simple than the zoning we have today, and potentially so much more clear and usable. And we want to know what happens when that kind of zoning ends up at the Committee of Adjustments, and also how often projects end up there. So please consider revising the plan.
That's great.
Save time.
Thanks, Rosalind. Really well said, and you know, especially for those people that do a lot of work, a lot of their applications go through Committee of Adjustment. I mean, it's really well said. I don't know whether Councillor Leeper, who has a question for you, is going to ask that Mr. Wise comment on what you said as well. But if not, I'm asking David to do that. But first of all, going to Jeff Leeper, Councillor Leeper.
Yeah,
Councillor Leeper.
I have two questions. The second of which will be, I'm wondering if Mr. David Wise can comment on. Rosalind, can you address cost associated with the kinds of exercise that you want to undertake? You've been making a really valuable, proactive volunteer contribution, lending your considerable professional expertise to the effort for quite some time now. That's not sustainable. You know, how would you see these modeling exercises undertaken by the city, and then what cost if it chose to go down that path?
Oh, I don't think I can answer that question on the spot, but I certainly would make available all the modeling that's already been done by me on behalf of Walkable Ottawa to be built upon. So at least there's a basis to be continuing that work. And I think we just need to look into it, because at the end of the day, it's a huge time and money saver. So it's one of those things where you spend money to save mountains of money. And also this kind of modeling can then be used by the city's group that's working on emissions savings to understand or to harvest from those residential modeling exercises information about energy saving, because this form of energy saving from multi-unit buildings in walkable neighborhoods is really the low-hanging fruit of energy saving as well, and hasn't been included in the city's energy modeling process so far. So there's the potential right there for, you know, millions of dollars of savings as a result of this spending.
That's valuable. Thank you, Rosalind. Sorry, Chair, I know you had a question for our colleagues in planning.
Well, actually, it's the same one that you had, which was asking Mr. Wise to comment. That was your second one, right?
Yes.
Okay, so over to you, David, and thank you very much, Rosalind. David?
So, Madam Chair, modeling is an intrinsic part of what we are going to be doing. In fact, we are already doing it. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is that 95% of the city is, and I'm just throwing that number out there, but it's between 90 and 95% of the city is less than 20 units per hectare right now. So we have certainly a lot of the areas of the city that are R3, that are R4. Not even all of those are necessarily up to capacity as to what the R3 and R4, and we went through that exercise with the R4 report. But we have a huge area of the city that again covers over 1 million people that we need to be looking for. And make no mistake, the new official plan touches every neighborhood. It will touch every lot. It will touch every community. It will touch every sector of the city. So we need to be very careful in terms of scaling these things. One of the things that we are doing is we're looking at setting up a series of models to really explore and understand what can impact and how neighborhoods might change depending on a series of varieties of contexts, partially based upon the transects, but also based upon the condition of the neighborhood and where it is now. Some neighborhoods are a lot further along the urbanization spectrum than others. And so we need to be, it's not a question of one model, it's a question of a lot of different models, and being very, very careful and very analytical about these things as we move our way forward. So I can assure you that modeling is absolutely a key part of that. One of the things that we are looking to do is also drag our geomatics capability out of the 19th century and move it into the 21st century. And that is the introduction of a new way of bringing geomatics, mapping, analysis, and fusing that with planning. And that's also part of the work plan and part of the shared collaboration with our geomatics division as well, too, and infrastructure IT services. That will be a very powerful tool to help us analyze the impact of the changes that we're looking at making, but also to be able to make those impacts a lot more understandable by not just me, but also by people who are outside of the city as well too. Just as a real basic example, the amount of work that needs to be done for a very simple question like, where are the front yard setbacks in the city with respect to low-rise development? And the amount of analysis that it takes in order to get a very simple answer like that is breathtaking. That is a simple piece of information that I should be able to snap my fingers and get. Rosalind should be able to snap her fingers and get, and any member of the public should be able to snap their fingers and get as well too. So this is also part of that exercise, is not only doing the modeling work that we need to understand what those changes are going to be, but also equipping us with the tools necessary so that we can do 21st century planning.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. And building on what Rosalind was saying about saving copious amounts of money, are you going to keep that in mind? Because that's music to my ears, and I'm sure several others, that especially if you've been around for a very long time. But can you take that into consideration in how we move forward?
So, Madam
Do you plan?
I would suggest that we already have. And a big part of what we are doing is we're proposing a bylaw that will be efficient. And that is to say, very clear, very easy to understand for the industry, and also for the general public, and also for staff as well too. That is a core. And so we are looking at not only making sure that we have a structure that lets us process what needs to be done in an intelligent way, but also results in an outcome that is also going to be efficient and save an awful lot of time and effort as an outcome as well too. So we have a couple of different processes and a couple of different input streams we need to take in mind.
So I think this leads to a whole different conversation. I think that that's a discussion that we can have in the next, well, 2 weeks from today is Christmas. So, but we certainly can have it, I would say, second week of January, we should have a conversation on that because I think it's important. You know, the planning department is a huge part of the economic recovery for this city, huge part. And where we can be more efficient, where we can do better and listen to those ideas that the industry and the communities have. And I think most of it will probably come from the industry for sure, but also within the staff at the planning department and the tentacles that come out from that, Dawn, in your shop and definitely Doug in yours. I think that that's imperative that we put that up for consideration right off the bat. How we can be what Ottawa needs to be, how we share those quick and put us in a really good place going into the next term. Which really, folks, is only like 14 months after the next council meeting. You know, like we've got so much work to do. I think before we travel down a path that every path we go down needs to involve efficiency, effectiveness, collaboration. And we've got so good at that over the years with all of our sponsor groups and that. We've never been, in the last 6 years is really where we have done so well and can do a lot better. So I see that's it for questions for Rosalind, but questions to staff, Vice Chair Gower.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've talked a lot about timelines and different reasons why it's important to get this new zoning in place as soon as possible. But I wanted to ask Mr. Mark, just make sure we all understand the timelines we're working on in terms of provincial law and in terms of protecting us on appeals and so on. Mr. Mark, can you give us a sense of what we should be aware of?
Yes, there is a provision in the Planning Act which provides that there can be no amendments through private applications to the zoning bylaw for 2 years after it is adopted. But to qualify for that, the zoning bylaw needs to be adopted within 3 years of the minister's approval of the plan. So I appreciate that we're looking at 2024, but it is important that timeline be met, because if it's not met, then I can anticipate that one of my colleagues in the private bar will make an argument that we are not protected from private applications because we didn't meet the timelines specified in the Planning Act.
Okay, thank you. To emphasize the 3 years, we have not a lot of room to spare if we start adding scope and so on. I want to go back to Mr. Wise. So this idea that's been raised about a test neighborhood is intriguing, but I get the impression this probably would be quite different. It would stray far from what you consider from quick hits, obviously, and would probably add time and resources to the process. But I just want to hear directly from you, David, about the idea of a neighborhood for test zoning, what that would do. Could that integrate with your quick hits idea, or would that really be a separate piece of the process, resource-wise?
Chair, I see that as a separate piece. I would not recommend including that as part of the Quick Hits Big Moves report. I think what we're looking at is we are looking at a fundamentally very different zoning bylaw. We are going to have to take the zoning bylaw apart completely. We're going to have to look at in terms of the new official plan policies as they move forward. And when we talk about changing to a form-based approach, you need to keep in mind that we need to develop what those categories are going to be. It's not simply a matter of saying, here's a form, we don't care what's inside it. There are land use impacts we have to assess: traffic, noise, well, not noise, traffic, height, massing, bulk, landscaping, waste management, all kinds of other filters and whatnot get rolled into that. And when we're talking about laying out those various categories for the various different neighborhoods, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach as well, too, depending upon where that neighborhood is. So there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done to identify what those form categories are going to be. That's not something that can or should be done within 4 months. That would be a really terrific way for the bylaw to be basically subsumed in waves of appeals. So we're going to have to work our way through this carefully. We recognize that we have a time limit that we need to work on within that 3 years, as Mr. Mark just enunciated. But we do need to again stress that this is a very substantial change from what we have today. And we need the time to do this properly. We need the time to be able to do the consultation work. We need the time to be able to do the modeling in conjunction with the input and the assistance from our colleagues at FCA and also from industry, so that we can make sure that as best as we possibly can, we do this right.
Okay, thank you for the input.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. To staff, the first delegate representing the FCA talked about and requested engagement and status early on in the process. Could staff just comment what the intent is to include major stakeholders like the FCA?
Yeah, following this report, the next step is the formalization of the stakeholder engagement plan and the public engagement strategy. That's something that's being worked on right now. I can say that certainly GOBA and FCA are key stakeholders that we absolutely will be involving. As part of the initial work plan for next year, we are looking at putting together a series of approach papers and also launching discussions and work on form and character, context, compatibility, development of the housing classes, all of those things. Those are all going to have subcommittees associated with each of them. Again, the stakeholder engagement plan will lay out exactly how those things are going to work, but I can say with assurance that FCA and GOBA are going to be associated with those working groups. And excellent. Of course, the Councillor Sponsors Group will also be involved in that.
Very well, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I know that Councillor Hubley and I have spoken about this a lot over the years, that we were engaged in the Building Better, Smarter Suburbs. I would say that the work that we've done there has set us up quite nicely for where we're formally going with the official plan. Maybe with some nuances on 15-minute neighborhoods and when that opportunity may come forward. But I would, and again, I know that if I'm not trying to speak for Councillor Hubley, but I've heard him say it a lot of times, the FCA doesn't represent our suburban community. So I see them playing a significant role, obviously, within the, inside the Greenbelt. But how much of the work can be adopted or just sanction, if you will, that we've already done on suburbs?
Madam Chair.
How do you see it fitting?
Sorry, I'm not. Did you want me to respond, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry, no, thank you. Again, we are going to be going into a variety of different contexts and developing different zoning approaches for each of those different contexts. And so we think it's going to be really important to be able to get very targeted stakeholder engagement from each of those contexts to reflect what it is that we're going to be doing in that area. Of course, all of that has to be consistent with the official plan. So the Building Better, Smarter Suburbs and the approach that was used in there and some of the suburban approaches, we need to, of course, look at that against the official plan and make sure that those two directions are very consistent. But I think in terms of getting that suburban perspective from the community associations and having that input, that would definitely be part of something that we would look at within the stakeholder engagement plan, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we did have a, we spent 5 or 6 years on the Building Better, Smarter Suburbs. We put all the pieces together. We do have people who were part of that process with Alain Miglis and Peter Giles for the whole ride. So I would think that, if there's an opportunity for low-hanging fruit to just say, to take a run at it and bring some of those people back to the table who have that kind of ready memory knowledge would probably be an advantage to you. I'm just throwing it out there. Okay, Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate you putting Building Better Suburbs on the table there because a lot of work did go into that. I just want clarification from Mr. Wise that refers to community association involvement, especially in the suburbs or in the rural environment. You're looking at reaching out to the associations in that area and not FCA in that discussion?
Chair, the zoning bylaw is going to touch, as I said, every community association in every sector of the city. So we are required to reach out to each and every one of those community associations and speak directly with them. Zoning is, this exercise is going to be a on the ground, very direct discussion on a lot by lot level. And that absolutely needs to happen out in the communities in which that zoning is going to be impacting. So the answer to that would be yes, sir.
That's the answer I wanted. Thank you very much, Mr. Wise. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm done.
Thank you. So everybody, on the new zoning bylaw proposed work plan, I presume that we haven't changed it. So are we receiving this or carrying it? Carrying it? Ms. Stephanie? I can't hear you.
Sorry, just let me open the agenda quickly and I can read out the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm seeing the major plan for, yeah, it's carrying it.
There's a proof, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
thank you.
Carried.
It's quite long. Okay. Any dissents? Well, good luck, Vice Chair Gower. I'll just throw that out there. And this, I'm not even asking you, like the favorite Mission Impossible question. Should you wish to accept it? Too late. Okay. It's a big job, and fortunately we've got a great team that is going to be leading it. Okay, so as far as the agenda goes.
Chair, did you want to go back to that motion for Councillor Shirley's comments?
Yes, I'm just going to talk about that now. I'm not going back to it, I'm starting it. As I mentioned before, when we were doing consent agenda, Councillor Shirley was having a difficult time getting onto Zoom. So as I mentioned, I said to him if he wanted to put some comments in that we would, have them as part of the before council. But he has submitted his comments that could be included in the councillor's comment section of the report. So I have a motion here that I hope that you'll accept, that the committee coordinator be directed to modify the ward councillor's comments section of the report zoning bylaw amendment 1642 Marable Road prior to council's consideration of the report on January 27, 21 to include comments submitted by Councillor Shirley on December the 11th. Is that carried? Yes, thank you. And I know that the comments have been circulated by Ms. Stephanie, and so they will become part of the College Ward comments on 1642 Marable Road. Perfect. Okay, thanks everybody. We don't have any in-camera items. Any notices of motion for subsequent meeting? Any inquiries? Other business? Other than Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all of the season's greetings. We have so many now that I would hate to miss one in the possibilities in our very diverse and multicultural city. Our next meeting is Thursday, January 14th, followed by a whopper of a meeting on the growth projections, the 25th and 26th, I think, and 28th.
If necessary.
If necessary. So there's also council thrown in there, just for the fun of it. Anyway, listen, have a good time off, everyone. I hope you stay well. And to all the people that contributed to the work that the planning committee, as the mayor calls it, the workhorse of the city, all that we undertook, to all the staff that assisted our businesses and our communities and our amazing residents. Thank you very much. Stay safe, everyone, and good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. All the best.
You.